Okay, let's continue with the origins of vibrational astrology. We're up to the fourth of 9 components of vibrational astrology. And the fourth component is that aspects and midpoint structures tell us how energy is trying to flow. Zodiac signs tell us an attitude or approach to life that is more difficult to confirm in quantitative research. So, the idea is that the aspects and midpoint structures show a dynamic. So when we looked at Buddy Holly, that Venus, Jupiter, Uranus shows us a flow of energy that is bouncy, is bright, is rhythmic, and is not constrained by a narrow linear approach. And then the signs give us color and attitude and approach to life. It's not as easily measurable. It's not as consistent and clear and sharp as what we see in the aspect patterns. Now, where do these ideas come from? Well, they come from what I was reading. Again, people like Dane Rudhyar saying that the astrology is a roadmap. A lot of astrologers saying that astrology is a roadmap, it's a guide, so that it's spiritual. There's the book by Isabel Hickey, Astrology of Spiritual Science, that somehow the astrology is at some high level of where we're destined or what lifts us up. So the idea was presented to me by many different sources. But then it was my interviews. So in one of my interviews, I told a lady that I thought she would have an inclination to play a musical instrument, perhaps a piano. She said it's not true, but everything else I told her was extremely accurate and helpful. As she was leaving, she suddenly gasped or quietly shrieked. I said, "Are you okay?" She went like, "Ah," like that. I said, "Oh, well, what's up? Are you okay?" And she said that she just remembered that when she was a very young child, her mother had a visitor. And while her visitor was there, and her mom's with her visitor and doesn't want to be disturbed, that she, as a little child, went up to the piano that was in the living room and, quote, played it. Well, 3 or 4-year-old who never played piano before, to an adult is banging on the piano. Her mother yelled at her, and she then remembered she made a silent vow to never play the piano. So this is just one example of the astrology being a force, a motivation, something that attracts us, that is a part of us, but then we respond to it. And sometimes it gets blocked or rechanneled in a different way. So it's a motivation, it's a force, it's the environment in which we live, and what we do with it is up to us. So the interviews confirmed this idea that it is a map. And I found that when people attune to what the astrology chart is saying, they feel fulfilled, they feel right, they feel in their element. So it was basically that comes from the basic beliefs that astrologers were giving in all these books I was reading, and my experience confirmed it. So that's where that comes from. And there's nothing radical or different or unusual in this case. In VA, it's agreeing with this perspective. And in VA, we stick to this perspective very, very strongly. In fact, we take it maybe to a greater extreme than in other forms of astrology. In that in VA, we look at everything as good. Everything is having a purpose. You might say a higher or deep purpose in our lives. Some things are easier. So people say Saturn is malefic. Maybe Saturn, tends to be difficult to deal with, but it's not because it wants to make our lives difficult and it's bad and it's just malicious. It's just because it's trying to take us somewhere that can be a little more difficult to get to, but it has a positive purpose, a purpose to help us evolve and develop. Now, a fifth idea of VA is that VA is practical. VA is very much focused on what you do with your clients, what decisions you're making in your own life, how you can use the astrology to improve your life. And, in VA, we also have controlled research studies to support the ideas. Some people get their exposure to VA through the research, because the kind of controlled research we do in VA is rarely done in other fields, And also in VA, we have all these numbers, 1/5, 1/7, and all this, and all these harmonics. And sometimes people get the impression that VA is very numerical and very scientific and very abstract and a little bit distant from the human experience. They get this impression. So I just want to make it clear that that's not really what VA is about. Was developed through thousands of interviews and consultations in the 70s. So it was the human experience that was primary, and then in the consultations, the purpose was to help the people, and still is. So VA developed primarily from use with clients in teaching and training students as well, and the controlled research studies came later. Keep in mind my BA degree major is psychology. So VA is simultaneously very much humanistic in the sense that it's focused on people's lives and the practical situations and helping people, and it also has strong scientific components as well. So all of these things exist simultaneously. So that's another part of VA, is that it's practical, and that's the history of it. The history of it is that in the 1970s, when I started work, I was not doing quantitative research. I was seeing clients. I did start a research project on accidents and started tabulating things without the help of statistical software or anything like that. Tried to get going with that, but mostly it was the human experience and helping people. And as I interviewed people, more and more people had questions, had real problems in their lives, trying to make difficult decisions, became the focus. So that's another part of VA, and that's the history of it. The history of it is that in the 70s, I was living in this cabin in poverty. I didn't mind. I liked it. I had lots of time. So I was rich in time, poor in material assets, and spent my time interviewing. Those later turned into consultations. So it was born in that environment of practical application with people. Now, and not only is VA practical and focused on working with people, it's evidence-based. Another way of saying evidence-based in the context of what VA is it's data-driven. So, where does this data-driven approach come from? Well, I got a master's degree in research and evaluation methodology from the University of Florida. Actually, fairly recently, I started around 2010 taking those classes and got the master's degree. So I've always had a very strong interest in science and research and analysis, along with everything else. So it's just, everybody has different interests and different tendencies. And the development of computer technology and implementing that research has enabled us to be extremely data-driven as well. So these different parts of VA are not contradictory. So the impact of this data-driven approach is huge. Okay, so that's the history of it. The history is simply that I got access to a computer around 1973 through a very strange set of coincidences. There was a fellow who's teaching computer science at the time was a community college. Since they've developed 4-year programs, Santa Fe Community College here in Gainesville, and he had this idea of an astrological dating service that the students would put in their birth information, and we would pick potential dates for them based on the astrology. He thought it'd be great fun. And someone told him about me, and as a consequence of his interest in starting an astrological dating service, I got access to his computer at the Santa Fe Community College, because at the time there were only these mainframe computers. And previous to that, I was using the computers at the University of Florida, here also in Gainesville, with punch cards and having to pay to use it. And here I got free access right in the computer room much faster, much easier to deal with. It was almost like having my own large computer that I could work on during weekends, and I would help him, the instructor, teaching the students. In exchange, I was able to work with the computer. We never started the dating service, but the history behind the evidence-based approach was that I had a bachelor's degree in psychology. I loved the statistics programs and the research classes, as well as the classes on therapy and counseling and so on. And then I got access to the computer, and that enabled me to calculate things quickly and start summing things up, tabulating things, save them, and then eventually save them in a database. And then when the home computers came out, the TRS-80 and Windows computers and Macintosh and all that started coming out around the 80s. And then all of this technology and my interest put it all together. And I ended up taking the classes at the university as well in order to strengthen my knowledge and make contacts in academia to perfect the research methods. So all of those things coming together made it possible. Any part of that missing, if I didn't get access to the mainframe computer before the desktop computers came out, and then the arrival of the desktop computers, it seemed like a series of lucky breaks that gave me the tools to do research, because just adding things up yourself on a piece of paper is pretty slow going, and doing the statistics and whatever. They're hand calculators, but anyway, the computer made it all, extremely fast and elegant and wonderful. And so we have done research on what the zodiac signs mean. What does Aries mean? What does Taurus mean? And we've come up with meanings for the zodiac signs that are a little bit different from the popular ones, and they're data driven. There's no selection bias. So there is this technical aspect, this, you might say, scientific technical aspect to vibrational astrology, where we confirm ideas through the research. We've done research on what Chiron means, what Ceres means. It's very, very fascinating, and it improves our understanding. These modern research methods work. So that's something a little bit different, actually very different about vibrational astrology. I think in a lot of astrology there's skepticism that modern research methods can tell us anything, that they seem too numerical, too mechanical, too distant, too unrelated to the real world and life of astrology. But there's much more to research methods than dry statistics. And we're using these methods to better understand how astrology works. And if we do a study and the study does not agree with our personal observations, it puts our personal observations into doubt. So VA is data-driven as well as client-driven and experientially driven, both simultaneously, and they reinforce each other. They're actually synergistic. So that's some of the history of it, these access to different tools and techniques and different interests, and that I've had as these ideas developed. Okay, so just more about the being evidence-based. Another thing to keep in mind about being evidence-based is I'm very academically oriented, and people in academia, people who, for example, go on to PhD degrees, as a culture, the academia tends to have very strong critical analysis. It's just the way it is. They tend not to draw conclusions prematurely, to check, to doubt, to look for alternative explanations, to be able to defend your answer against alternative explanations. So this is the style of academia. Any of you who've gone on to graduate school are familiar with this. It's not a whatever you do, whatever works for you. So, until recently I had only a bachelor's degree, but I'm kind of built in that same mold in modern academia. So from the point of view of astrology, VA is very critical and demanding, and always looking for alternative explanations. But from the point of view of academia, it's fairly standard. So I just wanted to mention that. A lot of this is influenced by the culture and the environment we grow up in, and that we are attracted to and we live in. Okay, so I mentioned the MA degree filled in weak areas of knowledge, and I've attended research methodology conferences. I gave a lecture at one. I'm co-author of an academic paper. So all of this is why VA is heavily evidence-based through the deep immersion in research methods and statistics. Okay, next thing of our 9 things. Every system of astrology has its tools. In vibrational astrology, we use harmonic charts. We often call them vibrational charts. And there are other tools like the timeline format, forecasts, etc. So where do these ideas come from? Harmonic charts were used heavily by John Addy. He used them in Vedic astrology. They have the Vargas. Some of the Vargas are harmonic charts. The Saptamsa and the Navamsa are harmonic charts. So I studied Vedic astrology. I studied John Addy. They were using harmonic charts. So that's where that idea comes from. Things like the timeline format forecast. As we develop the forecast, we get requests from users. We see what other programmers are doing and so on. We get different inspirations. We start developing data visualization tools, ways to see forecasting in new ways, like the astro signature forecast, the timeline format, which we find more convenient than the old-fashioned text listings. So that's where those ideas come from. I don't really have anything new and exciting and unusual to tell you about it. We have these tools just because this is what we learned about. And I will say that vibrational astrology, this is a key issue. Vibrational astrology is very dependent on the latest high-level sophisticated software. You really cannot do vibrational astrology just looking at chart wheels or a few basic other things. You can't do anything with that. We are totally dependent on high-level software to find these patterns, pull out what the strongest vibrations are, give us midpoint structures and all these visual tools. We are dependent on high-level software, and the software is constantly being improved and developed. So that's where these tools come from, is that we are just dependent on. We can't do anything without it. Very different from usual astrology, where someone will show me a chart wheel and they'll say, "Tell me about my chart." I can't tell you anything just looking at your natal chart wheel. I need to get into the software, pull up some vibrations, look at some different things, and then I can do it. It's just the way it is. Whether we think it's good or bad, that's the way it is. So computer technology has built the infrastructure upon which vibrational astrology is built. That's the history of it. So I got access to the computer at the University of Florida around 1973 because I was studying Vedic astrology and harmonic astrology, and I wasn't about to calculate 10 harmonic charts or 20 harmonic charts, or program a little calculator and look at this little screen. I wanted something powerful enough to just generate all this stuff. So, that's the history behind it. Is the history of going directly to computer technology and data information systems from 1973, from very early on, to get this information. I didn't want to have to just buy these graphic ephemeride printouts and other things. I could see that vibrational astrology was heading into too many calculations. It would just take forever. The only thing to do would be to have a computer calculate it all out for us right away. So there is a heavy dependence on information technology in vibrational astrology. And that's a little bit of the history of it, is that by 1973 I could see that to do the things we wanted to do, that was going to be necessary. Another thing about vibrational astrology is the integration with physics and quantum biology. In the 1990s, I started reading and studying various areas of physics and mathematics much more intensively By the early 2000s, extremely close parallels of ideas in physics with ideas in VA began to clearly emerge. So before the 1990s, I had a vague notion of these ideas, but by the time we get into the 2000s, the parallels and similarities between the ideas in physics and the ideas I was coming up with in vibrational astrology were striking. Like we're saying the same exact thing. And then it grew from there, where the details of how vibrational astrology works became very clear with the emergence of fractal theory and chaos theory and all these new ideas in mathematics exactly aligned and made clear how astrology works. Was able to build the bridge in very, very specific ways. And by the way, it's interesting that a big dream of Carl Jung was to integrate psychology and physics. Carl Jung had a huge impact on my thinking, and it's reassuring to know that we are following the same path that Jung followed. So Jung really wanted to see physics and psychology merge, and that's what we're doing. So a few examples of the merging of physics and vibrational astrology. Number one, this is just a few examples of this. So the first one is that the symmetry is fundamental in particle physics and in VA. So this is something that's very striking when you read these books on physics. They're always talking about symmetry, 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 supersymmetry. And so we have the same exact idea in VA. Another is the emphasis on vibration. And vibration is fundamental to physics from the beginning, with understanding that music is vibration, sound is vibration, light, the different colors are different vibrations, different frequencies, the development of string theory, that everything ultimately may be vibration, and we have vibrational astrology. I mean, the parallels are amazing. The emphasis, third, just as an example, the emphasis on probability waves, the mysterious nature of the double slit experiment, where the state of a particle is not known until it is looked at. So it's extremely similar to the way in which we look at astrology charts in vibrational astrology and in other systems, where as the potential of the charts comes to life as the person puts their energy into it. So there's so many ways. Number four, the emphasis on dimension reduction and string theory provided a basis for how zodiac signs are formed in astrology. We'll learn more about this in not in this course, but in future courses on where zodiac signs come from. We have very compelling, convincing argument for why there are zodiac signs, and it's extremely similar to ideas used in things like string theory. And also number five, ancient ideas in astrology like Arabic parts. Arabic parts are resonance points. So over and over and over again, we're seeing that resonance, vibration is fundamental to key ideas in astrology. And we use Arabic parts in vibrational astrology. They are actually resonance points. You can understand them in a purely vibrational resonance way. It's amazing. And also very exciting in recent years, the development of quantum biology, where in the eyes of living things there are quantum effects. What's exciting about this is that the quantum reality operates at a biological level, not just at the subatomic level. Well, these 6 items I've gone through very quickly. You may or may not follow or completely agree or understand what I'm getting at here, but it's a preview of things we get into in more detail in future courses on some of the ways in which physics and vibrational astrology are married, very closely married to each other. And there was some inspiration, for example, the book The Dancing Woolly Masters by Gary Zukov in 1979. So these books, hinted at how mysticism and science are one, but it was really after the year 2000, very detailed understanding that I will present in future courses. Last thing about vibrational astrology, it ties into what I just said. We have the physics, we have data-driven approach, we have intensive work with clients. There's so many different lenses and perspectives, all part of VA. So VA, when you look at VA as a whole, it's not just data driven, it's not just client driven, it's not just integrated with physics, it's all of these things all at once. And the detail that we understand about how vibrational astrology develops and the details of the theories that are all consistent means we have a very comprehensive theoretical framework, a very integrated system with a solid theoretical foundation to it. So to read from this slide, the integration of ideas in physics with ideas in astrology and the consistency of ideas in spirituality, psychology, and astrology results in a theoretical framework for VA in which different disciplines appear as different lenses into the same phenomena, rather than being competing or even different from each other. What I'm saying here is whether you approach VA from a scientific, a psychological, a spiritual, whatever perspective, VA accepts all this into it. They're consistent. They're not at odds with each other. And we understand the highly detailed ways in which dimension reduction works in astrology. Again, these are technical issues that are not important for the practicing astrologer, but if you're more of a theoretician or a researcher, there's that part of VA as well. In this course, Introduction to VA, and in the next courses, we emphasize VA for the practicing astrologer, how to interpret charts, the theoretical foundations, the relationships to physics, the exact ways in which these things work. We don't need to get into to be great astrologers. You can drive a car without knowing exactly how the transmission works. So as practicing astrologers, we're driving the car, we're using the ideas. And that's what we'll focus on, not only in this course, but the next coming courses, if I have time to make them here at astrologydc.com. But at some point, I can present to you all these other details on the physics of astrology, and they will be also available. They're already available on YouTube. I'm moving them over here to Astrology DC, so those videos are available now. They're just not integrated together into a course of consecutive classes in the way I'm doing here in this first course on Introduction to VA. So that material is available in other videos. Okay. So we understand the technical details of how the tropical zodiac sign and seasons are expressions of sacred geometry. We understand how the sidereal zodiac is created out of resonances with the tropical zodiac and the galactic center. All kinds of things that people debate and have different points of view on. We have very clear understanding about these things in VA. And we will learn about all these things, and you can jump into them now if you're curious by watching some of the videos. You can search for them and find them. And gradually, I'm going to make it easier and easier to find all these things and also integrate them together into courses. Okay, so concluding comments, VA is a universe of ideas that draw from many different sources. All of these ideas are pulled together in a system that is consistent and elegant. People who are deeply involved with VA are optimistic about the future of VA. We do not know exactly how VA will develop and evolve because any relevant ideas with strong empirical evidence will be incorporated into VA. Above all else, VA is data-driven and evidence-based. So this concluding comment is very important because what VA is today is not exactly what it will be tomorrow. How does VA change? From the research, from the observations. And eventually many ideas in other systems of astrology may possibly get incorporated into VA. If they work, if they're consistent, if they're reliable, we'll use anything that meets those criteria. Okay, so that's more information on what the components of VA are and what the origins of them are as well. Thank you very much for listening, my friends. God bless. Namaste.